Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Literature Festival 2026. In this seventh year and seventh edition, I'd like to welcome our amazing guest, Giti Chandra. Hi, Giti. A little bit about Giti first. Giti is currently Associate Research Professor with the Gender Equality Studies and Training Program under the auspices of UNESCO in Reykjavik. Dr. Chandra also teaches at the University of Iceland and has been Associate Professor, Department of English at St. Stephen's College, Delhi. Dr. Chandra did her doctoral work at Rutgers University, New Jersey, and is the author of Narrating Violence, Constructing Collective Identities. To Witness These Wrong Unspeakable by Macmillan, and co-editor of the Routledge Handbook on the Politics of the Me Too Movement and Decolonizing Feminisms, Transnational Perspectives with Tamara Schiffer Devyabhana. She is currently working on submitting a co-edited collection called Pedagogies of Reckoning, Colonialism and the Nordic Region. She is the recipient of an EDA grant for book-length study titled Invisible Text, Hidden and Spectacularized Violence in Colonial India and Africa. Welcome, Giti.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
today,
for having me.
it is an absolute pleasure. And today, Geeti will discuss a very, very important topic, important topic, and really close to my heart as well. The title of her keynote is Decolonizing Trauma. So, Geeti, from here, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine, and thank you for this exhausting and wonderful work that you are doing. I cannot commend you highly enough for putting all of this together in the way that you do year after year. I can't believe it's year 7
Thank you.
already. So thank you for having me. As you can see from my brief bio, this is a topic that is not just close to my heart, but something I've been working on since I began my doctoral work many, many, many years ago. And so lately I've been working a good deal on this idea of trauma. It's part of what I have focused on when I have been thinking my way through narratives of violence. And so, of course, trauma studies has been a large part of what I've been trying to do. And so, what I want to do is if I can do it quickly through a PowerPoint presentation, just so that you have something to look at other than my face while I'm talking. I think that it would be maybe most useful for us, given that we have a very mixed audience out there, to think very quickly about what I mean by trauma and why I think and in what ways it can and should be decolonized. And then just think of maybe 3 or 4 ways of looking at the idea. So not to present any exhaustive essay on the topic, but to give us ways to think about it. So I'm going to try to share my screen and we will keep our fingers crossed, won't we, that this will work. Here we go. Share, and I will go to slide and say from the beginning. Are we there?
Yes, we are.
Oh, amazing. All right. So, and Sabine, just give me, just give me a sense of time. When I'm at about
I will.
15 minutes, just let me know because you know that if you don't stop me, I will keep going. I have so many things to say. Okay, so I've called this decolonizing trauma, but the quote here is from Kathy Caruth. She says, "Silence marks the site of trauma." And it's something that I came across when I was first doing my studies on this, now 30 years ago almost. And it's stayed with me since. So while Karuth herself has undergone various, critiques and so on, this is something that I really use as a kind of center stone for the kind of uh, approaches that I take to trauma. So my first slide is really, why do we care? Sorry, I don't know what is. Hold on. Yes. And I think that I put this map out for people to look at because I think that often we think that that colonialism was a small thing that happened a long time ago. And if we ask ourselves the question that I always ask, which is that why do we care? Why are we talking about this? Then I think this map shows you the blue bits are parts of the world that have been colonized in one form or the other at some time or the other by the purple parts of the globe. And so just to think about the magnitude, the geographical spread that we're thinking of, and to say that what kind of impact has this had. So you can see here, this is Africa parceled out into different colonies. This is parts of the Indian Ocean and colonies there. Um, just to give a sense of how much of the world there was not an inch of land really would be rare to find that had not been colonized in the last 300 years under some European colonial power or the other. I present this often to my students here, especially, but everywhere, to say that the pink bits of the map, which constitute about 35, a little over 30, 33% actually, of the total landmass of the globe was once British. It was part of the British Empire. So just to think about, the reach, the global scale of colonialism, I think is just really, really important to get some sense of why we have to stop and think about what was the fallout of this. There are people alive today who can say, I was a slave, right? There are colonies that were liberated as recently as 1990. There are, of course, still colonies in the world, as we know, because certain people are trying to buy them, aren't they? Which we can talk about later. Um, so here, um, there is, of course, the global reach. There is also a sense in which no two colonies looked alike. And so when we talk about colonialism, we talk about many, many different things, or I do, let's put it that way. I know that, we can split hairs and there are various differences that are important under different conditions in different contexts, but this is just a small list of the kinds of things that I would put under the very broad dome of colonialism. So I don't want to go through all this, but Sabine, if you think at some point we want to come back to this in our discussion, we can always pull this up again and we can talk about it further. I want to just quickly mention crypto colonies, which is at the bottom. Most of these other categories are, familiar to most people who are interested in the area. Crypto colony is a term I came across here in Iceland, where because Iceland was ruled by the Danish for 700, no wait, from the 12th century to, yeah, about 700 years, right? And so it undergoes various positionalities as a subject of the Danish Empire in different ways. But historians here in Iceland sometimes use the word crypto colony for it because they say it's not a colony in the same way that parts of Africa and Asia were colonies. And one of the things that they take into account is the fact that they were not brutalized in the same way that those colonies were. The degree of violence and savagery and massacre and so on did not take place here the way that it did in other colonies. And so they don't want to appropriate that kind of suffering to themselves. So anyway, that and many other things involved in it. And so crypto colony was one of the terms that I came across very recently. And I think it's a very interesting category to put there, given that now Iceland is um, considered first world, um, and is clearly a very developed economy, etc. I also want us to look a little bit at this painting, which is titled, as you can see, "The East Offering Its Riches to Britannia." And it was painted, especially commissioned for the boardroom of the British East India Company. And um, a lot of how the narrative of colonialism was spun is present here in this painting. So it's painted in the 19th century. And you can see from a lot of sides Orientalism, you can see what's happening here. You see how the white part is up here, the black and brown parts are down here. You see how the East is willingly offering its riches to Britannia. And please look at Britannia. She is so white that she disappears. Her skin disappears into the white cloth and to the white clouds. That's how white she is. She's as white as the cherubs behind her. So clearly divinity is on her side. And in offering her their riches, the East is offering it actually to God, to a divinity, to a divine category. And it's a really interesting painting in itself. And again, Sabine, we can come back to this because we can spend a lot of time on this. But here is Albayan on the left corner with his scroll, which you can interpret maybe as being the scroll for deeds, deeds of land, etc. I love the way that the lion, which looks very much like a person, has zipped over to the left. We know that lions are not native to that part of the world. And you can see here, you can see tropical palm trees, you can see the navy with the ships, you can see chests with Chinese lettering on them, you can see Mercury or Hermes with his staff. Here are the things that we are bringing to the natives, etc. You know, people are offering various things. You can see from the features that this is meant to be a broad swathe of African, Indian, Asian, etc. And this was the way in which the British East India Company saw itself and what it wanted to present to the world. So I think this is a really interesting pictorial way of understanding what the narratives of colonialism are, even before Said decodes them for us. So one of the things that I want to put out here, before we talk about trauma, uh, is this comes from Said, of course, and you can see we can talk also about the image that is used for the cover of his book. Because it's also very rich. But the idea of alterity that Orientalism introduces, and while Said sort of talks about alterity in terms of, East and West, the us and them, but the us is the West, sorry, the East is them, of course. And not just in terms of race or reason, science, modernity, and all of that, but you can extend this actually almost indefinitely. So you can talk about how this works, of course, in terms of race. You can see how it works in terms of gender. Because remember that the colonized person is also gendered as effeminate, right? If it's Asian, and of course for the African male, which is, hyper masculine, then becomes violent and animalistic and predator and so on. So the whole enterprise of colonialism is so gendered in its workings. And you can see how this works in terms of class, where the male, adult, progressive, rational person is the upper class, the masses or the mobs are infantile, are childlike, need protection, they need the direction of the older person from the ruling elite, etc. You can see how this works in terms of women. The male is the adult, the woman is the child, needing direction, so on. So this idea of alterity is, it's incredible how it exposes to us the ways in which power works and how that is a template that works almost across the table for all kinds of power hierarchies. And it's kind of a bedrock both of the kind of violence that colonialism engenders, but also what it continues to engender, because long after colonialism is gone, these alterities remain. And so, I think it's Ta-Nehisi Coates. He says that if you were to, if you were to, through reparation, return and redistribute all the wealth that was taken away through colonialism, and give everything back materially, you would still be left with the racism, which you simply cannot give back or take back. And so this sort of table, this us and them, this remains as the legacy of colonial and, of course, of ongoing colonialism. Okay, so what I really want to, the way I want to think about decolonizing trauma is through knowledge. That is, how do we understand it as knowledge? I'm not looking at actual survivors or at active trauma or whatever. I'm looking at how we understand trauma. And so for me, um, the question again, is what is knowledge? How does our knowing take place? And why do we really care? And so for me, I have been, an academic and teaching in universities for, my God, 30 plus years now. And it's become increasingly clear. My first instinct is to disrupt, and it is to disrupt what we think we already know, and to take straight lines and blobs and spread them out into disparate points of information or knowledge. And once I've done that, then we connect. Then you can connect different things to different things. And once you do that, then you ask different questions. And if you ask different questions, you're widening and deepening your perspectives. And if you do that, then we can start to build an inclusive form of knowledge. And to inform is the last and the least of my concerns, because we keep forgetting because we use the internet for so many different things, but we live in an age where information is always there for whoever wants it in every kind. And so just as an approach to this subject, I thought I would put this out there. Yeah, we can always come back to this. Okay, so oh, I think I'm missing a slide here. Oh dear. Anyway, in my missing slide, I had said that what do we mean by trauma? What is it that I am going to focus on? And so one of the things that I use to delimit our discussion, because otherwise we could go everywhere, is that I'm looking at events of physical violence. So we know that there can be all manner of trauma, of course, coming from all kinds of trauma. There's psychological, there's mental, there's financial, there's all manner of violence. But I'm looking specifically at armed ethnic violence, and the trauma that comes from that kind of violence. And yeah, so to understand that first, and then to think about, well, at what point do we call it trauma? And this is a very, very large gray area, which psychologists, psychoanalysts, etc., can discuss in various different ways. For me, I go back to the original quote that I'd started with, which is that silence marks the site of trauma. And so trauma sometimes is defined as that which is inarticulable. You know how we speak of, we say this was unspeakable violence, that you cannot find the words for it. There is no rationality that comprehends this. And you will appreciate this, Sabina, as will everyone else here who appreciates words. But the word comprehend to me functions on two levels. It is both to understand, but it is also to contain, right? You give a comprehensive view, it is one that contains many things. And so words both help us understand and also contain a response, a traumatic response. And trauma is often defined as that which is not contained by words and therefore becomes incomprehensible. So yeah, so I would like to, and then I'm going to look at ways in which we can access or access knowledge of trauma. And so I wanted to look at how it is, what kind of historical research we can do about it. Do we have survivor narratives? What kind of narratives do we see in the public sphere, and maybe look at memorialization and museums and that kind of. So how do we access these events of violence, and what kind of trauma do we are we able to access from them? Um, yeah. So, one of the things that came as an absolute shocker to me, but this research is about 10 years old, is the case of what is called Operation Legacy. And so, if you think about studies of violent events, um, how do we know? This is history, it's in the past. How do we access it? We have documentation, historians work through various archives, and so on. What happens when certain documentation is taken away? It's erased, right? So here are erasures of commission. This is evidence that was actively destroyed. And so this is called Operation Legacy. It's the name that was given by the Ghanaians, I think, to the British colonial power destroying all evidence that might, as they say, embarrass Her Majesty's government, that referred to any kind of discrimination or racist violence or any other kind of violence at all, right? And so as the British started leaving their colonies, they were the administrators on the ground were instructed to destroy all this evidence, right? And so this is a you can see this, it's there on the internet. Um, it says all of the top secret non-accountable documents, and everything had to be destroyed. And so they said burn it. And in Delhi, when they started burning these documents in 1947, or a little before, I think, there was a pall of smoke that hung over Delhi for a week, like smog, because of the amount that was being burnt. And at this point, this was almost like sending up a smoke signal of your guilt, right? At this point, another memo went out to the administrators to say, stop this, it's too public, there's too much smoke, everyone knows you're destroying evidence of your guilt. And they sent instructions for how you could pack it into crates, what kind of lining you would put around the crate, um, how much weight you should put in the crate with the papers, and how many nautical miles out to sea you would have to take it and sink it so that it would not be washed back. And this is the degree of destruction of evidence, the amount of the physical tonnage in terms of tons of paperwork that was destroyed as evidence of what the British had done. Now, you may ask why, how do we know this? We know this because in 2012, could be 11, but 2011, 12, there were 5 survivors of the Mau Mau rebellion who turned up at the court in London, in England, to say, we are survivors of this rebellion, we were tortured, we want reparation. And they were told, no, no, you know what, that never really happened. There was no real rebellion, there was a little skirmish, a little bit this and that. This never happened. And the reason they could say that was because they had destroyed, as we can see, all the evidence. And I have more, slides of this. And they had some paperwork which referred to other paperwork. And in the end, this was discovered. This huge, large scale operation that was called Operation Legacy, I think only by the 60s, by the time that the African colonies are getting independence. And oh, here's my slide, right? In the wrong place. The bonfires of evidence. You can see here, he says, Ian MacLeod, he says, post-independence governments should not be handed any material that might embarrass Her Majesty's government, that could embarrass members of the police, military forces, public servants, or others, for example, informers, that might betray intelligence sources, etc., etc. And this is, codified in Ghana and Sri Lanka, perfected in Malaya, and the process was codenamed Operation Legacy in Uganda. Northern Rhodesia, you can see all papers which are likely to be interpreted either reasonably or by malice as indicating racial prejudice or religious bias on the part of Her Majesty. In Kenya, they said emphasis is placed upon destruction. In Malta, they said there may again be others which could be given to them if they were doctored first. There may be files which cannot be given to them, that is, the people taking over the administration from the British, under any circumstances. And this is a photograph of the Mau Mau suspects that were rounded up in 1954. I have got, I think if I go to my notes, I have notes on various others, but I can't see my notes right now. And so in Brunei, the High Commissioner asked in 1966, can I, off my own bat, destroy some of these papers, or should the whole lot be sent home for weeding or retention in your records? In North Borneo, they're told that the papers that would be unsuitable for the eyes of local ministers. So you know that you're handing over your government to the local administration. Officials in Aden were told to start burning in 1966, a full 12 months before the eventual British withdrawal, because that's how long they thought it would take them to find and destroy everything. Who should it go to and who should do the destroying? Because destroying is a logistically demanding business. How will you do it? Who will do it? So there was a shortage of British officers of European descent because only they could do it. You could not trust the natives to do this, not even half European natives, Eurasians as they were called. And this resulted in the hot and heavy task falling to two secretaries using a fire in an oil drum in the grounds of Government House. Eventually, the army had to be called in. In Belize, they were assisted by the Royal Navy and several gallons of petrol. And this phrase, the waste should be reduced to ash and the ashes broken up. Think about this. I mean, the degree to which this evidence had to be destroyed. This is like the destruction of Carthage, which was destroyed, reduced to rubble, broken up into soil, and then burnt, and then ash plowed into the soil so that no one would ever know that Carthage existed. This is so when we think about events of violence and you think about silence, then this is the degree of absence and silence that we're talking about. And this is 35% of the world. So there is more. I mean, there is now, for over the last 10 years, Caroline Wilkins first came out with her book, and since then there's been a lot of research on this. So we can always come back to this. And if I could access my notes, I would read out more examples for you, but this is enough. And then it turned out that there were files that were saved and taken back to England. And the reason that that was done was because there would be historical interest in the documents, not the issue of their sensitivity because of the kinds of crimes that it records, because like all colonial powers, but especially the British, they were excessively assiduous in recording and documenting everything. As most of them were. So, and I don't want to go into details because I'm looking at the time here. Sabine, you are not. It is now 15 minutes. But I've taken these footnotes from Wilkins' book, and she said that later they developed a historical awareness.
Fascinating.
The historical awareness that the decisions we take now will be important as precedents on future occasions. And the idea that the officials knew they were about to set an example as regards designing the long-term institutional memory of the empire. So one of the British peoples, he says that if we destroy this, generations to come will never know the grandeur and reach of the British Empire. And that is why those files were saved. And so now I can give you the details when we speak, Sabine, but the files that were actually preserved that still sit in a building in, I think it's called Hugh, but I'll look it up, in England, which have not been declassified, even though it's been much more than 30 years and they're supposed to have been declassified. Those files are still there. So as it turns out, through those papers, it turned out that people had proof of the Mau Mau rebellion. And of those five survivors, I think three are now dead. But at any rate, they finally managed to unearth this huge operation. So imagine that the unearthing of this operation is as recent as 10 years ago. Um, but in the absence of of that kind of evidence and information, what we get are public discourses instead. So it's colonialism is not taught. And those are the, erasures of omission. It's just not talked about. It's not taught. And so it's not mandatory. Some schools, of course, do teach it, but it's not mandatory curriculum. And so you can go through the best schooling and education in England, in France, in Germany. You would never know that these countries had vast colonies at all. Instead, what you get is a lot of public discourse, beautifully produced. The Crown was such a popular serial. Victoria and Abdul, true story, right? And what you get instead is this kind of cultural public discourse about the colonies, where, in the Crown, they quietly gloss over the fact that when the Queen receives message of her father's death, she is in Kenya while the Mau Mau rebellion is going on at her doorstep. She is right there. When they talk about Churchill, we sympathize with him because he takes to painting. He's lost his son, poor man. We're not actually talking about the 4 million that are dying in Bengal, right? And we are asked to sympathize with the Queen. So I have much more to say about that, as you can imagine, but later. And Victoria and Abdul, it's a true story. But the fact is that it stands in for the whole. It is one very rare instance of a personal relationship between the Queen and an Indian subject, where they are friends and they're, close to each other and all of that. But that relationship stands in as, for the whole, instead of the massacres and genocides um, that mark the reign of the British almost everywhere. Um, and so it's what I call reinventing archives. You destroy one archive and then you replace it with these other narratives. And there's also what I call the cultural appropriation of colonial trauma. So, we see the suffering of the Queen. We applaud her selflessness. We applaud her difficulties as a queen and a person and a woman and a wife and a mother and all of that. While the actual trauma, and I don't want to say actual because I'm not denying whatever trauma she went through, whatever hardship she went through, of course, but that it is a kind of appropriation. When we think of sympathy, we have the sympathy for the Queen, not for the colonial subjects in this series. So cultural narratives and appropriating narratives, why do narratives matter? And I think that, um, we all know these two gentlemen on the bottom right and left, or at least we know the person on the right. I shouldn't call either of them gentlemen, should I? Males. Um, but when you think of evil and violence, you think of this person on the right. You never really think of the guy on the left. And yet, Leopold's savagery in Belgian Congo was considered savage even in his own day. When at a time when that kind of absolute barbarity was par for the course for pretty much any European colony, even then Leopold's brutality was such that his own parliament said to him, "What are you doing?" His own court said, "What are you doing?" And eventually it was taken away from, it was his personal fiefdom. It's taken away from him personally and given to the court, or to the nation, to the crown instead. Um, so the top left, the photograph is of a place called Snake Island. You can look it up. I put it there just because it's a byword for brutality. On the right is actually a cartoon that was created in his own day, in Leopold's own day, and that's Leopold's face, and that's the native African Congolese. And so why do these narratives matter? So, in one sense, there's a way in which, and I say this every time I talk about this, Sabine, but my own doctoral and much of my work since then has been from the Holocaust. I have talked about, researched it. It's been a huge part of my own research of violence and trauma. Um, and one of the things that I've, you know, seen when I think about decolonizing this is how much material is available and how many resources there are, both financial and political, and in terms of academia, there are for researching the Holocaust, and how little there is for. I think the Belgian Congo is now among the more notorious, so there's more available on that, but on the rest of the colonized world. Um, and so there is a reason why there is a need to decolonize trauma, to say, yes, here are the horrors of the Holocaust. Here are all of these other Holocausts that no one looks at and no one talks about. So, in the Holocaust itself, for instance, the 6 million that is often cited to us are the number of Jews. But there are a full three-quarter million of Sinti and Roma over and above that 6 million who are gassed but through state policy. So there is the 1935, I'm going to say, could be 36, race law that says that these are inferior people who don't deserve to live. So they are destroyed as a matter of state policy, right? And so when we speak of the 6 million, we never say six and three quarters. We never say Jews and Roma and Sinti, right? And the way in which so much emphasis and focus on one thing makes you blind to everything around it. And that's why I think there's so much need to decolonize this, not to take away from the one, but to add to it. Um, and so why narratives matter? Today, for instance, with all that's going around in the world, whose trauma is trauma? So one civilization's extinction is trauma, the other is politics, right? One is a Holocaust and so traumatic, for the other, we're still quibbling over whether it is a genocide or not. Is it, isn't it? Oh, look at all these hairs we have to split in order to decide, is it or isn't it, right? Whose trauma do we memorialize? Who gets the funding? Right? If you're an academic, you want to do research. If you are a sociologist, anthropologist, whatever it is you are, you want to go and you want to do research, you need funding. Who is funding you? What are the resources available to you? And so whose trauma do we memorialize and whose just gets forgotten? Who gets to have intergenerational trauma? So this is one of the things that came up post October 23. Rightfully so, there was a lot of care, a lot of attention given to Jewish students on various campuses to say they may not be discriminated against, but they have what they call intergenerational trauma, which is a real thing. And my sympathies, absolutely, no question. But who else gets to have intergenerational trauma, right? What happens to Arab students? What happens to African students? What happens to Indian students? How is it that they don't have intergenerational trauma, right? So that why narratives matter, right? Um, and then my other list of questions: what is terrorism? And so if we look at who gets labeled, because this is a list that international law draws up, these are terrorist organizations or terrorist states or whatever. Who gets put on there? Who gets taken off of there? Whose violence is terrorism? Whose violence is resistance? Who is a human shield? This was part of a conversation and debate, as you remember. It continues to be, but less so, but a couple of years ago. So and so is collateral damage. It's a human shield. And who is an innocent victim of war, right? Whose suffering is suffering? So these are the questions that we ask if we think about decolonizing trauma. There are very specific answers to these, and we can all talk about them. I know that I've been beating this drum now for a while. But this is why this whole area needs to be looked at afresh, not to take away from what we know, but to add to what we know. So very quickly, Sabine, how much time do I have? Have I been going on for like half an hour now?
Yeah, more or less.
Oh my God. Okay, you know what? Very quickly, I'll just bleep over this and we can come back to this. But when things are historicized or memorialized, public memory and memorials, I went to Berlin one day, one day. I went to Berlin and it was a Monday. Everything was shut. And I was only there for a day. And I walked into a church because I love churches. And I saw you know how they have these caskets of the royals? They don't actually contain the remains, but there are these caskets, sarcophagi, whatever you want to call them. And usually you will have angels over, over the casket, weeping or whatever it is. And the holding up the caskets are usually, eagles, lions, that kind of thing, emblems of royalty. In this particular church, I saw these. And I you can see, from some of them, you can see very clearly that these are, I would say, Asian. They're not African. They're not looking happy. You know how you will get those images of the native bearing the palanquin with the sahib on top, and they're looking very happy to be, carrying the sahib around. Look at these people. They look visibly sad. And they are showing you their chains. They're not hiding them. Look at that man. He's holding up the manacles. He's hiding them. I couldn't get over that. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then when I looked at the particular person whose casket this is, it's early 17th century. And when I looked it up, I discovered that um, Germany was among the first to join the Netherlands in its slave trade. This is as early as the 16th century. And I was just thinking about, I mean, that to me, that in itself is neither here nor there. But this kind of, what kind of memorialization do we see? Um, the Humboldt Forum opened up after many years of construction, reconstruction, renovation, etc. And they did this absolutely jaw-dropping, but I mean that in a bad way, uh, um, exhibition. They call it Open Storage Africa. And yeah, we can come back and talk about this, about how it is. So that basically they position you as walking into their warehouses as a way of not framing or exhibiting because there are all of these problems with it. So we can come back to this, as I call it, the curious case of the Humboldt Forum. And finally, of course, um, so many ways in which people are decolonizing trauma and violence and traumatic events all over the place. We can talk if academics are interested about the backlash against Kathy Caruth, who actually formulated trauma studies, very significantly. There's Michael Rothberg's notion of multidimensional memory, which is an interesting idea, and I have a critique of it. There's in South Africa and universities there, the Rhodes Must Fall and other fallist movements that are happening, where, as you can see, Rhodes' statue is taken down and similar things happening everywhere. So we can think about how the world is decolonizing trauma. But I'm going to stop here because, oh my God, how long I have been ranting. Okay.
Oh, that doesn't seem like a rant at all. Really interesting, and I wanted you to go on.
No, no.
So thank you so much. There's so much to, talk about. Um, and, you're absolutely right when you're saying trauma, it is something which you cannot articulate, right? Um, and I never knew about the bonfires of evidence. Uh, wow.
Me neither. I discovered this, that EDA grant that I had for this book on Asian and violence in Asia and Africa. I got the grant in 2017. So when I started the research on this, I came across Caroline Welkin's book. So almost immediately after it had come out, and it was such a shocker. Like, my God. But the reason I think it's important is because if you are a historian, you're a researcher, um, when all the material archive is destroyed, then how do we access that event of violence? How do we position? these post-colonial countries as having trauma, because we don't have any evidence of it. Now, not to say that there's no evidence, because of course, there are other people who give, the evidence, etc. But where on the one hand you are collecting data and archiving, and one of the wonders of academia, actually, when I was doing my PhD, was how much effort is put into archiving the Holocaust and survivor narratives and so on. And I
True.
remember in 1997, which was the 50th year of independence for India, Ashish Nandi and his group of researchers, they went looking for survivors of the partition, and because it was the 50th year, and they were, and of course these people were the people who were old enough at the time to remember it, were dying at this point. They were very old, and so they went and found people and persuaded them to talk, because people don't talk about events of great violence. There are all kinds of beliefs. Veena Das has done a lot of work on this, about why people don't speak of things that are unspeakable in themselves, but also they don't articulate them. And she has all of these theories that I've worked on as well. And suddenly the newspapers were full of these accounts, which was, such a change from the way that you see papers today. But back in 1997, to see, full pages of survivor narratives in the newspaper as a public open forum, it was such a change in the way that, people were, until Urvashi Bhutalia
Yeah,
decided to ask what happened to the women during the partition who were taken over on both sides. Until then,
true.
historians did not touch it. It was an untouchable, literally an untouchable subject. People worked up to independence, and then post independence, nobody worked on the partition itself because of this. So things are rendered unspeakable because no one is going into that area. It's too traumatic to talk about.
Plus, also, and I'm now going to refer to a conversation I just had this morning. I was
Hmm.
recording a session with Annie Zaidi and other
Hmm.
Yusuf. So one is from India and one from
Hmm.
Pakistan. And the
And how
session was
wonderful
on,
she is, no?
yeah, I know, she's like,
Yeah.
and the session was about cinema and memory.
Hmm.
And and it got me thinking. She talked about Pinjar, the book, and
Hmm.
the adaptation, and how the agency of a woman was taken away
Hmm.
in the movie, in the sense, in the novel. I haven't, just what she told me,
Hmm.
just relaying there.
Hmm.
She said, in Pinjar, the book, the woman, she has a child,
Hmm.
and, which is the reason why she doesn't want to go back. But in the
Yeah.
movie, it's not about the child. There's no child. I mean, she doesn't have
Hmm.
kids. It's her own choice that she does
Not
that.
to go back. Hmm.
But and that kept me thinking, because I don't know a movie, Pakistani movie, which is based
Hmm.
on the partition. Nothing.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I really can't think of, like, there may be something, like, in maybe in parallel cinema, some, but we haven't seen that. Uh,
Hmm.
and the the other speaker from Pakistan, so he was lamenting about the fact that even if he has a script, because he's into theater, even if he has
Hmm.
a script, or if you want that, there are so many issues because of sensitivities, and
Hmm. Hmm.
because of all that, we are literally collectively suffering because of our
Yeah.
government. That is another
Yeah.
form of colonization or neo-colonization.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it, even then and now, even then, meaning in that session, as well. And even now, I'm thinking about Romela Thappar's book. I recently read. It's called "The Present Colonizes the Past," right?
Mm.
But that present is again, going by what you've just presented.
Yeah.
All the bricks were laid, like for example, we're talking about the British here or the colonizers here. They laid out precisely that, the jigsaw puzzle, so that when it's done, like which is the present for us, you know
Mm.
they are, this is what they visualized how it would be, and
Mm.
not, and you spoke about, I really love that, to disrupt
Yeah.
in class. And that is
Mm.
what, that Arab Egyptian amazing, amazing author, Sadawi, Nawal al-Sadawi,
Uh-huh.
right? So
Uh.
she basically said the same thing, to disrupt in a classroom and not
Mm.
to inform. And when you read
Mm.
Ramana Thapa's book, The Present Colonizes the Past, how it is presented, in Pakistan, we talk about the two nation theory, okay?
Mm.
And
Mm.
it
Mm.
was, and no disrespect to, a lot of our people who are part of the independence movement, but it is being taught that Allama Iqbal had this dream of the two nation theory, but it goes way back to East India Company and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the author, the white writers who
Yeah.
basically made this, India, the South Asia, which was
Mm.
like a very intricate weave into
Very
something which,
syncretic, no?
exactly, which
Yeah.
we made it into black and white. And that
Yeah.
black and white was like, that, somehow it wasn't a diverse culture, but that of the ruler and the ruled,
Yeah. Yeah.
black and white,
Yeah.
Muslim and Hindu. And it was
Yeah.
never like that.
It was never that.
Yeah.
I was a couple of years ago working on another article, and I looked at the census that the British took, because as I was saying, as we all know, there was one thing that they did really well, and that was to document everything. And so when they conducted this census across British India, then, first of all, they had this understanding of religion, right, which did not exist in South Asia. The notion of religion as by a book and of a certain kind of dogma and churches
Yeah.
and blah blah, this kind of thing did not exist in the same way. And so when they started asking people, what is your religion? And people have to think a little bit. Unless you're saying, well, I'm Muslim, I'm Hindu, I'm, Sikh or whatever it is, that part is simple. But then you would have the Ahmadiyyas.
Yeah.
And they'd say, "Oh, yeah, Ahmadiyya, okay." They say, what is this Ahmadiyya? And they say, sounds Muslim. They put it under Muslim.
Yeah.
And they would say Sufi. They say, what is this Sufi? Sufi. So it sounds Muslim. So they put under Muslim. Or they'd say, well, here is the Jain, let's chuck them with the Hindu. So there was a way in which the construction of these dichotomies
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
created
Yeah.
and archived and put into official, records
True.
in a way in which the country itself never really saw itself that way. But
Exactly.
then, after a point, of course, you start seeing yourself through your documentation, and that's what is
Absolutely.
then,
Absolutely.
I mean, not
Yeah,
this
go
is,
on.
as you know, this is part of the work that the subaltern theorists started with. To say that, well, when there was a riot that was caused by something, there was a procession, Muharram procession or whatever, there was something happened and there was a riot.
Yeah.
And so while they're documenting this, it could have been anything. It could have been because of any reason, but they will say in this ancient,
That was
you
what
know,
I was coming to. Yeah.
right? So it's documented as this always already condition that
Exactly.
these people
Exactly.
live in,
Yeah.
because they themselves have this, east, west, us and them kind of alterity that we go back to that alterity table.
Yeah.
So everything comes into this always already existing rivalry, jealousy, enmity,
Yeah.
you know. which then
Yeah,
gets
yeah, yeah, yeah.
one of the things that has really gladdened my heart is the way, I don't know if you've been following it, but the student protests in India going on that have
Yes,
just finished.
yes, yes.
They have no patience for this. They have
There
zero
is hope.
patience for this
There is
narrative.
hope.
I swear to God, they have
I was
zero patience with
I
this.
was so depressed, honestly, and I was like, oh, this will just simmer down. And I was saying that, and, you know, looking
Yeah,
at it,
I mean, who knows what will happen? Because I think what they've asked for was cosmetic. One person resigns. I believe the person
true,
who's come in place is no better. But whatever it is, I think that what
the
really
pressure is
gladdened
there.
my heart, what gladdened my heart is this entire generation that has zero patience. You know, one of their slogans was, "अच्छा, अब protest हो गया, अब एक बार हिंदू मुसलमान कर देते हैं." You know, so they recognize
Wow,
it as a stupid slogan
wow.
that is there for division, and they have no patience, and they have wit and humor, and they ridicule this entire, imposed narrative. That's what really gladdened me. I thought, if you have a protest, people have been protesting the protests, from the 2018 19s that COVID put an end to. They were so much more
Yeah,
serious, and they were so much, and these guys, they're just like, they have these memes, they have these jokes, they have this
yeah,
humor.
yeah. Giti, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, when, last year when, their tensions arose between India and Pakistan, we live in
Mm.
Dubai and we have not just in the UAE, but we have amazing friends in India. You're my
Of
friend,
course.
right? But I was really apprehensive for my kids, who had
Mm.
Indian friends.
Mm.
It was a joy to see how they were interacting,
Mm.
and and that's like, that gives me hope, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that
Definitely.
generational trauma for us,
Yeah.
this generation, Alpha and Gen Z, they're going to decolonize that for us.
I think so. I think so. I think that this was, a couple of years ago when the students in U.S. universities
Yeah,
were staging all of these
yeah,
protests, and I remember, at a conference in my university here in Iceland, I was saying that, what, we are at the heart of the ideas machine as academics.
true,
And
true.
yet, these kids are getting their education from social media. And
True.
they have no patience with the old narratives that have burdened us. They see this for what it is. They are not burdened by all of this other stuff. They're like, this is colonialism, you have to stop. This is
Yeah,
a genocide, you have to stop. And it's clear, to them. And the fact is that they have done it without us. They have done it without the instructor. They have done it without the curriculum. And my entire sort of rant to the university at that point was that we have to start taking responsibility for teaching this stuff. We have to bring it into the classroom. We cannot wait for social media to do our work for us. The
true.
fact is that that's what these kids are doing. They're getting a very good education, by the
Yes.
way, from
Maybe
social
we
media.
burnt ourselves in front of them, and it's like, you know, rise of the phoenix or something like that,
Maybe,
from our
maybe.
ashes, from the generation
Yeah,
past.
maybe. I hope so.
Even though
I
I
certainly
love
hope
being a
so.
Gen X, but
Yeah.
uh,
Is that what we are? I keep forgetting what it is that we are.
I think we're Gen X.
Oh, I think you
I
and I are several generations apart, Sabine.
yeah.
At least a
I don't
couple of
think so.
alphabets apart.
But yeah,
Yeah,
and disrupt, again, coming back to, knowledge, and how it's consumed and how it's you engage with it. The most important thing, knowledge and history, you need disruption, because
yeah,
information will be there, and it'll be popular, but
yeah,
if you disrupt, you engage with it, you have a
yeah,
conversation with it, right?
yeah. You ask different questions. I think that's what, yeah. I mean, part of the whole, part of the whole accessing events of violence and trauma as knowledge. The problem is, as one of my historian friends said, he said that you may have a problem with the archive, that there is not enough archive. He said, then you ask different questions at the archive that you have.
Yeah. Yes.
So that you have a particular kind of you cannot have access to it, they burnt it, it's gone. Then you ask different questions of the archive that you have. And I think that's also what's important, that you, of course, historians should go out and they should find stuff that no one has found before, but also we should just learn to ask different questions of what we have.
Because truth is in the
Yep.
nuances.
Yes, that's true decolonization.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. There's so much we can talk about.
I
Uh,
know.
and I that's why I didn't want you to finish, because this is not just fascinating. I think
Yeah,
we don't talk enough. I mean, do we talk about, how to, about really decolonizing
yeah,
trauma? Because I think that's the first step towards, uh,
yeah.
create not just creating a meaningful conversation, but how this world might, I don't know, be a better
Yeah.
place. I don't know. Even
Yeah.
the, even these words now seem like, this
Seems so cliched, no?
exactly.
But I mean, the thing is that you keep working towards it anyway, right? I remember giving a lecture, oh my God, maybe 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
Well, at least 11, 12 years ago, but it was in my college in Delhi University in St. Stephen's. And I mean, I remember saying that, we are a traumatized nation. Everybody carries so much, and forget nation. I think as a people, everyone carries so much loss. And it could be
Yes.
it could be only personal loss. It could be the loss of people you love. But it is also collective loss. It's that when you when we require people to stand up and put their bodies on the line, this is not what we were this is not what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to have a place in which you can exist peacefully.
True.
You're supposed to live in a society and a civilization that gives you certain things, no questions asked. You're supposed to exist in a culture in which your dignity, your sanity, your safety are given to you as a right. We should not have to ask people, to be martyrs and to be heroes. Why should we? Everybody's not a martyr or a hero.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we shouldn't have to be. And so I think that, as a culture, we live with so much trauma that it's not something that we need, I mean, it's not something that therapists have to handle all the time. Of course they do. But just the need to understand it, I think, is just the beginning. Uske baad, then we'll see if we can ever get rid of it.
I'm just afraid of all the, you know, I feel exhausted.
Yeah.
And that is traumatizing for me. For feeling exhausted, uh, I'm not fighting the good fight, but,
You're
trying
fighting
to,
the good fight, Sabine. Everybody is. That's
yeah,
what I'm
but,
saying. You don't have to go out there and put yourself on a cross. We
yeah.
shouldn't have to do that. And I think you're contributing so much. Look at this that you've done. Incredible.
Well, thank you. But I hope, I'm just afraid of being too exhausted. And, well, I will still get up, but even the thought traumatizes me of not
Yeah.
doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is what we call feminist fatigue.
Yes.
And the patriarchy is depending on you to get tired and
Exactly. And I don't want to give them that.
and give up. But there are lots of people fighting. Look at these young people. I'm so proud of
Yes.
them.
Yes. That,
Yeah.
let's stop at this very good note.
Yes, yes, let's
There
stop
is
while
hope.
we're on a good note. Thank you so much, Sabine.
Thank
This is
you.
really wonderful.
Yes, and it has been an amazing. I wish we could have, we have more time, but I know, time, is important, and to compartmentalize and, keep the conversation going. have something for later as well so that,
Yep,
people, continue the conversation. So thank you so much, Giti, for coming
absolutely,
on.
Sally. It's a pleasure.